All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the No Caller podcast. Today I'm your solo host, Nicholas Ochieng. We're doing a special podcast from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm joined today by my guest, Javier Thompson. He's a host of the Vibrant Sons podcast.
Yeah.
My fault on that.
No, you're good.
Go ahead and say what's up, Javier.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's an honor to be on this podcast, man. Nick has told me so much about everything, and I'm almost envious that I can't be a regular host on this podcast.
Oh, man, we'd love to have you, man. Just move back out to Cali.
Oh, most definitely.
I'm not alone entirely. I have the Black Kim Possible with me on the other line. My Wade from, Kim Possible. She's away in San Diego, but she couldn't be here today. She'll be chiming in with some questions, and I'll be throwing those in here and there throughout the podcast.
Yeah.
So, Javier,
What's
you
going
are
on?
an inspiration.
Really?
Needless to say, you have a podcast with what now? The 20 episodes or so?
We just released the 25th episode, but I don't know when
25.
this will come out, so...
Hey, man.
But yeah, as we're recording this, the
Yeah.
25th episode was just yesterday.
That's wild. That's really crazy. I remember hearing that you were starting a podcast, and I was
Yeah.
like, man, that's crazy. And I'll be honest, it wasn't always my dream to have a podcast. It was kind of just something that happened with
Yeah.
some friends, and we're like, the content we're talking about. And I was like, and I know someone that's doing a podcast.
Yeah.
I have all the, we have all the right minds, ideas, and connections, and we're like, might as well just make this happen. So it's really awesome that you're here today, man. Honestly, like, being a friend of mine that has a podcast, like, I kind of look up to yours. I listen to your stuff. I'm like, this stuff is great. These are great topics, and it helped me realize that our friends have so many stories just amongst ourselves. So
yeah, man, that's so heartwarming to hear people say that I'm an inspiration. And because of the content of my podcast, I can be an inspiration in multiple different ways, And I wish I had, like, when people tell me how much they love the podcast, it's almost like I wish I had a much larger vocabulary so I can express even deeper than, oh, thank you, I appreciate it. Or, I'm glad that you enjoyed it,
Hey,
I wish
man.
I could say even more
It
because
comes from the bottom of
it
your
means
heart.
so much, yeah.
Hey, that's all that matters. But it's great to have you on our show, man. This is a special episode. I wish I had my whole team here. They probably have so many questions for you, but I do have Nella with me, so we'll go ahead and kick it off.
Okay.
I'm gonna say for the first question, just give us some background. Like, what is it that you do?
Okay.
How did this podcast come about?
Okay. So, my name is Javier, of course. Nick already introduced me, but I was born in LA, but raised in Atlanta for pretty much my whole life because I moved down there like 2-3 years old.
For sure.
And what can I say? Like so kind of give my background up until this point, I guess, like condensed, of course.
You could do a condensed version. Let's figure out where to start. Okay, so you have a podcast.
Yeah.
You graduated not too long ago from Oakwood University.
In 2016.
2016. What was your major when you graduated?
My major was biology.
Biology?
Yeah, I was biology pre-med.
And that's crazy. And your podcast, tell us a little bit about the podcast. What is it about?
So the podcast Vibrant Sons is, the tagline for it is challenging. It's a platform dedicated to challenging the stereotypes associated with non-traditional families and empowering the communities, inspiring our communities toward a brighter future.
Right.
And the way that we do that is by inviting guests on to talk about their stories of growing up in these non-traditional family types, which, can be single mothers, single father, adoption stories, or no parents, anywhere on that diaspora. And people telling their stories, talking about the challenges that they had to face, but ultimately the keys that they use to overcome them, and then share that with the listeners so that we create a community of people kind of destigmatizing the topic of non-traditional families, because especially in the Black community, topics like mental health and growing up without your father, growing up without your mother, and how those challenges have affected you is such a taboo topic. So, and it's something that has affected me personally because I grew up without my father. So that's kind of where that podcast the idea came from, and the mission behind what I'm trying to do with it.
Gotcha. That's really great. And I was gonna say it's actually not anything really related to biology.
No, not at all.
So, how did that come about? Like, how did you find this niche? Like, how did you decide, like, hey, I should do something about this? Like, make that first step.
So, I guess when I graduated from college, my whole focus was to become a doctor. I was pre-med and I wanted to get into medical school, and I was applying, doing all the testing and all that stuff like that. But as anyone who has applied for medical school knows, that it's a very long, drawn out process. It's an expensive process.
It's not simple.
It's not at all. You know, once you submit your application, and you have to submit your secondary application, and you have to do all these things, and it's like a lot of introspective type of thinking, and it's just a long and expensive process, just to say the least. And so I went through that, and the first time that I applied to 10 schools, and I got denied from every single one of them.
All 10 schools?
Yeah, from all 10 of them.
That must be heavy.
Yeah, it was a big blow to me, because especially growing up in my household, my mom saw me as like the golden child, I guess, or like the one, because no one in my family previously had really gone to the whole traditional route, like high school, then college, and then to a high-paying degree for the most part.
So she put that pressure on you to do it.
Yeah, for the most part.
That's kind of the theme of our podcast, is kind of our slogan. We have a saying, like, dreams that stress our parents out. I left that out of the intro for those who know it. But tell us a little bit about your mom's background. Like, are you American? Are you...
Okay, yeah. So my parents, my mom is Panamanian, and my father, which I don't know that well, is Guatemalan.
Okay. And so with that background, I'm assuming she probably had a similar immigrant dream, the migrant dream, where they come to America and they plan to like make a better life for themselves. Yeah. And they want the most for their children, right? Like they want you guys to succeed, obviously, and just do better than they did. Yeah,
because my mom, you know, she's worked so hard, and I think because of the challenges that she's faced in her life, she's kind of been forced into somewhat of a middle class lifestyle. Right. And where she's, you know, just working full time in order to just keep the house, you know, going and pay the bills and all that stuff. Yeah. So she, you know, her working so hard, she's told me and my brothers she wants better for us to be able to live and not have to worry about money, and to not just, you know, be in that middle class kind of cycle and be able to do so much more. And, you know, she wants us to take care of her. That's her ultimate goal.
Like, listen, I'm not trying to work for the rest of my life. Like, y'all better do something. So I totally get that. Being African immigrant myself, my parents brought us here, you know, with the promise of opportunity. They're like, go and be better than us. And a lot of times it doesn't leave much space for our dreams that we have, or like our aspirations. But how much of going to med school would you say was your own dream, and like her coaxing you to just achieve and excel?
You know, it's kind of hard to say, because I'm trying to do all of the the post-analyzation now, and it's something that I'm working through, and I haven't necessarily seen a professional about it. Right. I've really been procrastinating about it. I've been going through so many different, like, I'm in a volatile situation, like life.
Like a pivoting point, right? Like,
yeah, right now everything is kind of up in the air. So I kind of want to be more stable before I like build a relationship with a doctor, you know, and a therapist. But I guess me doing the post-analyzation, it's hard to say, because right now, I guess how I feel is that, you know, my mom putting all the pressure on me from a young kid, you know, saying this is what you should do. And I always had a passion for the arts, or an interest in the arts. Like, I think my earliest dream was probably to be like a movie director or a movie. And she was like, well, instead of being a movie director, why don't you look into movie producers, because they make more money. So she just pushed
you a little bit higher. And but she was kind of along the dreams that you had, right? She was
in a way. So then, you know, as I got older, you know, things, I think she really liked the fact that one day I came home and said I wanted to be a doctor, and she never got that out of her head.
She's stuck with it and ran with it.
And so ever since that, you know.
Do you know about how old you were when you said that?
I think I was like 6th, 7th grade.
6th, 7th grade. So you're still relatively young. Like, you wouldn't know nothing about the education required, or like how long it takes to actually be a doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
But it sounded nice, and like something you once.
And the dollar bills were super attractive. Yeah.
Everybody knows doctors are rich. Like, come on.
Yeah. So she really, you know, wanted me to do that, and. You know, now the way I feel about it now is that, you know, she really pushed me, and to the point where it almost was like, it's hard to tell if it was my desire or her pushing me so much, to where it, like, I just kind of cultivated over time, and it's like, okay, you know, this is what everyone expects from me, so this is what I should do. I'm smart, I have the potential to do it, so why not do it, you know?
That's cool. So it was like half your dream / the support from your parents and her enthusiasm that gave you the drive to just go ahead and seek that career out kind of thing. Yeah. Gotcha. I feel that. That's
and when you're talking to people, whether it be your peers or mentors, and you say you want to be a doctor, everyone wants to pour into you because they see that as a lucrative career or a very, quote unquote successful career. A
success story. A lot of people want to contribute to success stories, whether or not they'll benefit directly from it.
Exactly.
I think that people are heavily invested in things that they can vouch for. Like, you don't even have to know a doctor to be like, if you're a doctor, you're going to be set. Like, you'll be fine, and so I can invest in that dream of yours. Exactly. So I feel that. So what happened over time? Because you mentioned going to school. You finished your bachelor's in biology, and then you applied to med schools, and you faced the sad rejections.
Yeah. So then, I didn't give up just then because I got rejected. I was like, let me go ahead and do it again. But then the second time, I was studying and everything, and I applied to the schools that I wanted to apply to. But in that process, once you submit your applications, it's still it's kind of like a stale period of waiting to hear back and not really hearing anything. You're like in this kind of, what I like to say is purgatory. You're not in heaven or hell yet because you're waiting on the rejection or the acceptance. Exactly. And it can be, depending on how, I guess, attractive your application is, it can be really quick or it can be very long. And in my case, it ended up being a long process. So in that time, it was a lot of me questioning a lot of things, and I got frustrated with my future being in the hands of someone else and waiting to hear for an opportunity from someone else. Yeah. So I was like, let me create an opportunity for myself. Okay. I have all this idle time. I'm not studying anymore. I already took the MCAT. Let me try to focus on something that I want to do during this time. Right on. And during that time, that's when it hit me. I can't say I thought of the podcast. Yeah. It just came to me. I've always wanted to do a podcast, but never really felt like I had anything to say. Right. I guess, I'm a religious person, so I would say God kind of gave me the vision to start this podcast. Okay. And that's where Vibrant Sons kind of came out of, was that period where I felt like I wasn't getting any opportunities. So it's like, okay. And I was reading Charlemagne's book, Black Privilege, Opportunity Comes to Those Who Create It. So I kind of took that tagline. Yeah. Opportunity comes to those who create it. And it's like, if they're not going to give me any opportunities, I'm going to create my own. Just make it on. And that's what essentially that's what I've been doing ever since.
I feel that. That's really cool, man. That's awesome, like how ideas can just like appear out of nowhere. And you said like your faith, I'm a Christian too, I believe in like God given like visions and things of the sort, like ideas that you're like, I didn't just come up with that on my, like, whoa, this is something bigger than me, like and what you're doing is really important, like addressing those topics. Like a lot of people need to hear the other perspectives. People like me and my brother, we come from I guess technically traditional. We have both of our parents, and they raise and support us, and they never separated from each other for any period of time. It was just always a whole family, you would call it. And so when I hear stories like yours or the people you interview, I'm just like, wow, like they were going through this stuff, and I think back to all my friends that I grew up with who had divorced parents. I'm like, we hung out with them, we played with toys, but we didn't have to go home with them at the end of the night and see what they were facing, what kinds of issues or what stuff even they weren't necessarily focusing on, but like later on they could realize how it affected them and that they can tell their story.
Yeah, most definitely. This process, of me interviewing, I started with my family members, I started with my best friends before I was able to get some of the bigger names and quote unquote celebrities and prominent people to get on my podcast. I started really close, and that was a very eye-opening experience for myself and for my family members. I had cousins, call me or text me and say, hey, I heard you say these kind of things in your podcast, and I never thought to even ask you about like your father. Like these are things that have kind of been swept under the rug for a long time. So I really encourage everyone who listens to my podcast to bootleg my podcast as much as you can and have these conversations. Just
spread it out there,
in your family groups, in your friend groups, as much as you can. Lessen that divide between people. Open communication is where you find a lot of growth. Right.
Go ahead and plug it. It's Vibrant Sons podcast. is that the website?
Vibrant Sons, Vibrant SONS. So that's just a play on words.
Right.
At
Clever.
first it was supposed to be from the perspective of men who grew up without their fathers.
Right.
Because that was my perspective. But then it grew to so much more once I started learning more and meeting a lot more people who were interested in the podcast and wanting to get their stories. So it widened to, people who grew in non-traditional families.
Right.
Because I think if you listen to the very beginning of the podcast, it's like almost cringy, where it's like, oh, we're talking about fatherlessness.
You were talking about, yeah.
And I had a therapist come on my podcast who kind of told me that I should probably stay away from the fatherlessness kind of thing, because it's talking that's not, I forget the phrase that she uses now. If you listen to my podcast, she'll say it, but
right.
It's not like productive speech to say
right.
that we're talking about fatherlessness. We try to encourage people to talk about what you already have.
Right.
Don't focus on what you don't have.
I feel that.
But so it's Vibrant SONS, which is a play on words. Usually when you think Vibrant Sons, you'll think of the sun in the sky.
Sun in the sky, right.
But that plays into more of what the podcast is about too, because I encourage all my listeners to emulate the sun in the sky. The sun is bright when it's dark outside, and it's warm when the universe around us is cold.
Yeah.
The bodies furthest away from the sun are cold, like Pluto.
Right.
So I encourage everyone to be like the sun. Be warm in a cold world, and also shine light through darkness when there is no hope.
That's awesome, man. That's really dope how you came up with that.
I appreciate that.
I love saying it too. I'm just like, Vibrant Sons. And it's like, you show someone the podcast, I'm like, just take a listen. Like, you're going to see why it says that.
Yeah.
But that's really dope, man. So I guess your podcast is kind of taking you some places, hasn't it?
Yeah.
What keeps you going? Because I mean, that would be another reason why. But what keeps you going on the podcast? Because have you heard back from any other med schools? Like, how's that process going right now?
Oh, so the from the medical schools, drum roll, I got denied from all the schools again.
Oh man.
And I think it's I don't think it's kind of funny, because right now I don't think it's anything I did. I really blame it on this curse that my friend put on me, because when I started like doing a lot of creative stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I've always been into creative things.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, Yamo the Goat, who I had on my podcast once, he told me straight up, like, he was like, bro, you're not going to get into medical school. Like, you'll never get into medical school because you're too creative to be in medical school, and you have too many things that you need to do to be in there. And at that time, I'm wholeheartedly trying to get into medical school.
That wasn't inspiring back then, right? I'm like, forget you.
Exactly. I'm like, I can do both. Forget what you're saying.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, I think it's his curse. Almost like, Holes, where Miss Zeroni, she put that curse on Stanley and his family to like, your generations will, until you carry me up the mountain.
Right.
I probably have to carry Yamo up the mountain before I get into medical school or something. Yeah.
Man. Well, for sure. This is working.
But,
it's working. It's doing things for you.
Yeah. So
go ahead and talk on that.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't get into any of the medical schools. So right now, I was like, in that time, I was still contemplating, well, should I go into a post-bac? Should I get a master's or whatever? But, during this whole time, I'm praying a lot. I'm reading a lot, reading the Bible, reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts, interviews, stories of just like anybody who's made it, to try to see how I can emulate what they're doing, and people who find their purpose in life, and figuring out how I can find my purpose. And through that, I kind of realized that my purpose is kind of coming from this podcast. But with a lot of creative people, like, you may be really passionate and you may find your purpose in it, but where is the money going to come from,
Right.
So that was always the biggest issue for me in this process. And I started the podcast in December, so it feels like I've been doing this for a long time.
For a long time. It's less than a year.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Like only 7 months.
Yeah.
And so where was I? Where was I? So I was talking about like how I didn't get into medical school. So now I'm trying to find that where the money's gonna come from this purpose.
Right.
So I'm just applying to a ton of jobs, and where I am and where I was with this podcast, especially early on, I could flip it into so many different things, because I'm doing a lot of social media marketing.
Right.
I'm interviewing. I'm getting involved with mentorship groups, doing public speaking. So just off the top, I can flip that in so many different things. I could get into marketing.
Right.
And get into journalism. I could get into mentoring or joining like a Big Brothers Big Sisters and become a coordinator over there or something. So I'm applying, just throwing out a lot of C's to see where they
fall.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
And now I've gotten to the point where a lot of them have kind of manifested, and I've been getting job opportunities and partnership opportunities with different people. And I don't necessarily want to jinx it too much because some of it is still, the ink's
works.
not dry.
Yeah, we're gonna leave that on the hush hush, on the down low. But right on. I feel that. So in terms of not getting into med school, how did that go over with your mom, who was so hopeful for you and in that area?
That's actually like kind of a fresh wound right now because I just got the job offer to work in Detroit. So I got a job offer just recently to work in Detroit with this new charter school that they're building, that it wants to be so much more than just a charter school, because they're the only school in the district, and it's a for lack of a better word, it's like an African American district, or a lot of people, African American people live there, and it's kind of an impoverished area. So they want to be like a community center, and they want to do so much more. So they found out about me, love what I do through the podcast, love the technical skills that I've gotten because of it.
Right.
And they want to bring me on as their staff, not as a teacher, but they haven't necessarily built a job description yet, but they know that they want me to help them with their cause.
There's just so much promise and brightness in your future. Like they're like, we need this guy. Like, let's just secure him here before he does anything else. Like,
kinda, yeah. So I just got that job offer and accepted it on Friday, just this past Friday, and now it's Monday that we're recording this episode.
So man, so that's super fresh.
Yeah. So with my mom, getting back to the question, she was always, I didn't tell her anything of what I've been doing, like all the different jobs I've been applying to. I guess in her mind, she'd always thought that I was just trying to get into medical school or trying to get into a post-bac program if I wasn't able to get in. And I never wanted to say anything. I know it probably, some people are listening are probably like, oh, why would you do that? You're going to stress her out and all that stuff. But from my perspective, it was like, I didn't want to say to my mom, this is something I'm thinking about doing, or this is something that's in the works. I didn't want to approach her about it until I had it solidified.
Had some facts to back,
because right now I'm living at home. You know, and I didn't want to worry her and be like,
stress out that situation.
Yeah, so it's just like, my plan was to say, I got this job offer. I'm leaving this date. You don't have to worry. I'm going to be gone. I'll be self-sufficient, you know? So that just happened on Friday.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I feel for you, man. How did that conversation go, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Sure.
So for the most part, she just kept saying what about school? So you're not going to go to school? She just kept harping on school, less than I'm going to be out the house, less than I'm going to have a job and be self-sufficient. She was like, so what about school? Because she doesn't want me to get stuck in, I guess, a dead-end job or be stuck in a job with no education and there's no growth.
Right.
So she was like, what about school? You're not going to go to medical school? And I was like, no, I'm not going to medical school. But I did kind of make a promise to myself that if I did get this job, it'll still be a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And even though I'll be working closer to what I'm passionate about, because I'll be working with kids and mentoring maybe kind of capacity.
Yeah.
I still will have hopefully some free time, and I want to go to school, maybe do a master's, but I don't know in what yet, because right now I'm still a ball of clay. I could master's in marketing or master's in journalism, or,
exactly.
anything that I listed before.
Yeah. So you could basically shape this new future, like this new career path that you're slightly following, and tailor the next degree towards that better. Basically,
yeah. Once I get more of a idea of where it is that I want to be, because right now I'm just kind of like,
you just got fresh, like you just got.
I'm still in it, and I kind of have this Zen mentality where it's like I'm just a surfer riding the wave right now. I'm confident that I won't fall off the board, but I have no idea where the wave is going to take me, so I'm just going to ride it.
Right, you could end up or down the beach, somewhere, but
so I don't want to limit myself. I don't want to stress myself out, because I feel like if I do stress myself out, I might fall off the board. Stressing so much, I'll throw myself off balance. But as long as I ride that wave and I take advantage of every opportunity that comes before me, just keep elevating each time, then I'm confident that it's going to work out, because there's so many people like yourself, who see value in what I'm doing, and it just takes that, that opportunity, that right person to hear what I'm doing or to see the work that I'm doing and say, I see the potential. This is where we can go with it.
Yeah. All right, I got a question coming in
so
from
that's Wade.
That's what the pause is. All right, Wade just hit me up. Okay, so she has a question about what your biggest goals are with the podcast itself, because I know you're gonna branch into a new line of work there in Detroit, but in terms of the podcast itself, because it's such a major and important piece that you're doing, I confidently and genuinely believe like this will go far, like in itself. So what do you want to do with it?
Yeah, so the podcast, I guess myself and the podcast have two separate goals, but the podcast, the biggest vision that I have for the podcast is to get as many celebrity guests and as many prominent individuals as I can to inspire as many people as I can, you know. I'm someone who's deep into hip hop. I love hip hop, and I follow these artists almost as if it's sports, because I never really watch sports or anything. So off the top, I can think of so many guys who have contributed to the culture who grew up in non-traditional families like myself. Like immediately I can think Tyler the Creator, Frank Ocean, Kanye West, Drake, Jay-Z, and then all the way to politics, Barack Obama, who has spoken openly about it. You know, these are people that have a huge following. And these guys, they kind of touch on it, but there's never been a platform that solely focuses on them telling that story.
That specific story.
Yeah, that specific
and
story.
And grouping them together into that group of people that's like...
that collection, right? And then also having them talk about what they did to overcome these struggles to become the successful people they are, and to overcome, you know, small things that they may have in their lives, and talk more about the mental health piece. So if I can get as many of those guys on my podcast, that would be deeply inspirational to me, because I already look up to these guys. But for their following and for the general public to hear that, I think that would do so much more for destigmatizing people who feel uncomfortable with saying, hey, I grew up without my father. Because especially in the black community, that's a joke. You know, that's ammo that's always used against us. You know, that's a meme where it's like, oh, your father hasn't been around. You don't know who your father is. And that's something that happens across races, across populations. But for whatever reason, I mean, I get more in depth on that in the podcast, where
take a listen, y'all. It's really important, and it's really good stuff. Like, you'll learn a lot.
I have like a specific 2-part episode where it talks about how slavery has impacted the modern black family, and how these stigmas that we take on, or some of the things that we have as challenges, were introduced to us on the plantation, and it's not something that's indicative of the black I guess experience. It's more of indicative to the slavery experience. And once slavery was abolished, there was no big movement to have like rehabilitation of black people. You know, we were sent out into the world with this broken mindset. You know, our women were raped, our men were abused and also raped, and our children, you know, everyone went through this huge ordeal, tragedy for lack of a better word, you know. And there was no rehabilitation process to bring us up to speed, while all these other populations, you know, were on levels above us.
They could take their time to be established, but we were like literally starting from ground zero, like below ground zero.
Below ground zero.
For real. Cool. That definitely answers the question. Like, I mean, back to the question, but like,
so that as
to
far
get more celebrities. And
I just want as much exposure with that as possible.
To inspire people for the future. Yeah, I dig that, and that's kind of a little bit of our goals for the future is to eventually, you know, get some prominent figures. I mean, everybody looks up to someone in Hollywood. Everybody looks up to directors, actors. Everyone looks up to people who are making it. TV stars. Everyone looks up to people in bands. Everyone, you know, everyone wants to be a CEO type of thing. Like, but we're trying to get down to the process, kind of like the things that drive people and motivate people, and we try to eliminate the drawbacks that they might face, whether it's from their family or whether it's from their friends or them not believing in themselves. And we just want people to know, like, there's paths to being successful, and people might say luck, but it's also about being there for the luck. We were having that conversation with my cousin.
You have to be prepared for the opportunity.
Exactly. So it's like steps you can take to, you know, be better motivated, have skills that you want, skills that you need to get to the places you want. So Another question coming in from Wade.
Okay.
Okay, so the question coming in is, while you did do your whole med school process, obviously it's a tough process, even getting your biology, bachelor's in biology, you had to work on some skills, work on yourself. Like, let's say maybe you 4 years ago wasn't able to make a podcast or have certain skills that you gained in school. So what skills I guess disciplines from school do you think like prepared you for
transfer over?
Yeah, which of those skills like kind of helped you along the way in this path that you are doing, even though you are not going to med school?
Yeah. So immediately, one that I often think of is how much biology puts emphasis on research and finding reputable sources for your research.
Yeah. Right.
So when it comes to getting a guest on my podcast, I try to do very diligent research and trying to find reputable sources for that research. So it's like finding all their old interviews or finding any project that they might have worked on and kind of going through those liner credits and stuff like that.
So it's made you like a better detective in a way, like better at digging up these, you're like, I'm a small person, but watch me find this person. Like I can get them on my show kind of thing.
So, and not running away from the hard work, because biology is hard work.
It's definitely hard work. I respect that so much.
And a lot of creatives, sometimes I guess there's a stigma with creatives that they don't work hard and that, we just work whenever the creative flow hits us. And I guess studying biology and doing that whole run in college has taught me to not run away from the hard work and to enjoy the process, trust the process.
Okay.
And then one thing that I indirectly learned from doing medicine was the importance of networking.
Right.
Because when I was doing medicine and trying to get into medical school, I really... In the time, I guess I was proud, or I didn't really see the value in doing that work because I just trusted the whole process of
the one that's laid out on the books. Like, it's not as simple as they make it seem.
Exactly. Like, all you have to do is get good grades, pass the MCAT, or get a really high score on the MCAT, do your applications, and then you're in. That's all you have to worry about. And I was overlooking the networking piece and how important it is to go to these summer programs and to network as much as possible, shake these hands, so that when they do see your application, they already kind of know who you are and they'll look out for you. And that's very important. And that's something that I didn't get back then. And I can kind of maybe attest that to my failure in medicine. But that's something that's been my success with podcasting is taking advantage of networking. And when I get a guest on my podcast, not only do I ask them to refer it to a friend, but I say, refer me to someone that you think may be a good guest for my podcast.
Just network off the bat.
Exactly.
Keep it about networking.
And try to keep my contacts fresh. Yeah.
I feel that. That's inspirational because it lets us know that, like, even if you are in school, even if you're doing something you're not necessarily wanting to do at the moment, like, you're going to gain so many skills. Like, anything you do in life, there's some takeaway that you can get from it. And it's school especially, like, it's not easy. I mean, some people find it, like, super easy, but that's a small percentage of us, you know? Like, there's always something to be learned through the process. And that's why I think very inspirational people talk about trust the process, because the process will give you knowledge of anything, even if you don't do exactly what you set out to do.
And while we're on that topic, that's something that I picked up from this book, and it's geared towards, it's The Way of the Superior Man is the title of the book, but it's something that I took and I think that can be applied to anybody. Is that you almost have to look at your life or your passions as like an onion, right? So let's say my purpose at one time, my full purpose was to become a doctor.
Right.
But at a certain point of time, it's not that, I guess at that point of time, I had to be super focused on medicine to get to where I am now. And even though I may not have been fulfilled, or like my journey may not have been, the ultimate purpose may not have been for me to become a doctor. It may have been for me to get all the way up until the point to where I got frustrated with school and the process to do my own thing and to rely on myself. So it's like an onion. You have like,
peel it back.
Once you reach that point, it's time for you to make a change and to peel back another layer of that onion until you get deeper and deeper into your true purpose.
Right.
So my purpose at one time was to make a lot of money. And then that purpose was peeled away to become a doctor.
Right.
Then that was peeled away to become, you know, a podcaster. And now eventually maybe this might be peeled away to do something bigger, you know? So don't ever feel like, whenever you feel a failure or something like that,
when they say embrace your failures,
embrace that and know that, you know, now you just peel back another piece of whatever your deeper purpose is. It's almost like a cocoon, you know?
And you didn't really give up on it. You applied again. You did a second wave of applications.
And the door isn't completely closed for me in medical school. I've come to terms with like
that
God,
might be another layer down there.
And that, you know, I may come back around to medicine, and this period may just be me cultivating even more skills to make my application more attractive, or to make my purpose in medicine even deeper, to where I'm not just a doctor going through the rounds. I'm a doctor who knows what his purpose is and my value in my community, and to know how I can have an impact in and outside of the office.
I can only imagine what that intro letter would be like to college. Like once you go through all this journey that you're on, like, man, they will not be able to not deny you. Like, you know, they won't be able to deny you.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, if I go down that route, hopefully they won't deny me again.
Yeah, but hey, man, that's awesome that you're open to, you know, the experiences that life brings with it, and the lessons that you learn along the way.
Yeah, if anything, man, this past 7 months has shown me that you have to be completely open. For the longest time, I was closed-minded to just having this one goal of being a doctor. Yeah. And once I let that go and embrace all the other career paths that can be opened up to me, and trusting that, because I think one thing that I touched on a little bit earlier, but I didn't really go in depth, was how I trusted the process of medical school, and I was really narrow-minded in that. And it was because I didn't trust myself, or I didn't trust God or life to really pursue anything else. You know, like with medicine, it's very narrow and it's a very direct path, where other careers, it's like, it's more open-ended, where it comes down to networking, or it comes down to that internship, or that hand that you have to shake to get into this special law firm or this marketing firm, or in politics, you know, it's all about who you know, and that person can make or break your career.
Exactly.
And a lot of that, especially for parents that we have, you know, they see that as job insecurity, and they don't want you to go.
They don't want you to go to fields that they don't know anything about. And like I was saying earlier, even if they aren't a doctor, your parents themselves, or even if they don't know directly any doctors, they'll support that 100%, because they're like, at least it's secure. And like, security is a huge issue with our parents, which naturally they just, you know, they're here to provide for us and to make sure that we go
exactly. They see that as job security. Like, they can't take away, at the end of the day, no one can ever take away your knowledge, and you went through this long schooling process to where no one can take that away from you. So I put my trust in that system, didn't put it in myself, and now I've tried to reverse that whole process, where now I'm putting full trust in myself, and not in any career path in particular. And I'm putting my full trust in God to see me through, and God is that wave that I'm riding, you know, like, I'm just trusting Him, and He's gonna carry me to the beach.
I feel that, man. Blessings on your journey, man.
I appreciate that.
I have I guess maybe some closing questions regarding challenges. We'll start with the challenges. Like, what were the challenges to starting, like, the podcast?
Okay, yeah. So, like, now you want me to specifically talk to podcasters?
Yeah, to podcasting. Because like, this is your, you know, the next layer of the onion, if you want to call it that. Like, that's kind of spreading you out to different things. What was the challenge, like, in getting into the podcast?
So getting into podcasts, I guess step by step, I can say one of the first lessons that I had to come to terms with is, when you're starting a podcast, you think that all these podcasters have so much knowledge about their audience and about how many people they have subscribed and all this stuff like that. Huh? You have no idea. There's no quantifiable number to say I have this many subscribers. I mean, you can go off of your downloads and different stuff like that, like your weekly downloads, to say this is probably an estimate of how many listeners I have, unique listeners that I have. So that's one thing that you have to overcome. But when it comes to podcasting, if you want to have a great podcast, you almost have to treat it like a business, to the point where You have to know that it's so much more than just interviewing. It's so much more than just producing content. You have to be able to market that content. You have to open yourself up to so much more. And primarily it's marketing. And marketing is so hard for podcasters because I think of it as like a like death in three ways. It's like, or it's like that. Trial in three ways because for one, so you're trying to attract listeners, right?
Yeah.
So for one, a lot of people don't know what a podcast is, don't know how to listen to a podcast, don't know, that they have to download an app, all that stuff like that. So it's already hard.
It's like a slight hassle. It's not something you can just integrate.
Exactly. So for one, people don't know what podcasting is, don't know how to get them. And once you get those people once you've found those people who actually know what a podcast is, now you have to figure out how to become the top of their queue because the average listener is probably subscribed to maybe 20 podcasts, but you may only have time to fit in maybe 5 podcasts throughout in your weekly schedule for the average person, maybe. So you have to find a way to become that top 5, right. So that you don't fall at the bottom of the barrel. So it's supreme marketing to where you have to not only be a great podcast, but an essential podcast to this person's life. And to where they don't want to go a week without listening to your voice or your take on whatever it is that you're talking about.
A real quick observation on that, because we were having some discussions and we showed your podcast to some people and even ours. And in regards to like reaching an audience of people who like, it sounds like the marketing strategy is aiming for people who are already listening to podcasts. But I noticed that the person we were trying to explain our podcast to like had never listened to a podcast before. Yeah. But like they found the information so intriguing to them that they were like inspired to now listen to podcasts. So do you think there's also like a huge untouched market of people who just aren't listening to podcasts? Like
most definitely. There's a lot of people that are just unaware, and that's
how do you market to them?
Well, to them, you just have to market your idea. I mean, I don't have it all figured out.
That's something I'm trying to do. You're still pretty young. You're less than
and there's a lot of research that I can actually connect you with some research. I forgot who did it, but I was in this Slack group for podcasters where this guy put it up, and it talks about the statistics of how many people listen, how many people don't, of that demographic, what the age groups are, different ways so you can find out how to effectively market. But what was I going to say? Okay, so for those people who may not be familiar with, I have to download an app to listen to a podcast, whether it be SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, or Radio Public, or Google Play. There's so many different barriers just in itself. Pretty much everyone's familiar with YouTube, so you can put audio streams up on YouTube, you can put video clips up on YouTube, and people who may not be looking for podcasts may, on a suggested search, come across
a video.
A video of you guys speaking, and that way, and you can use YouTube's search engine optimization to further market your podcast to a demographic who's not looking for a podcast, but maybe looking for interviews on YouTube.
On something too,
and stuff like that, or TED Talks,
Reach them through other medias that they're already using, even if it's not podcasts. I feel you on that one. Right on.
And even when it comes to social media, I try to put out marketable snippets or video clips,
bite-sized
and just
clips.
in minute long, or maybe a photo. Like I'll do photo snippets where it's just a quote, and then I'll do minute-long snippets where it's a video, to where people can, I guess, digest it on whichever way is most applicable to them.
Gotcha. So along the lines of challenges, would you say like viewership or I guess listenership, getting people to listen is probably the main challenge at this point? Because it seems like you have recording figured out, you've kind of like started figuring out how to get guests on you to interview with you.
I mean, recording is fairly simple if you're getting into podcasting, because there's so many apps now, like ways. The Anchor app. I don't utilize it, but I know some podcasters who do, where you can literally just record off of your iPhone. And there's USB mics, which we're using right now, which are relatively cheap. Like I have a Blue Snowball, which was only like $60. I have the Blue Yeti mic, which is $120 roughly, and you can probably get a much better deal than me if you go on Amazon or eBay. These are USB mics that plug in directly with your computer. And if you have there are free recording softwares, like I use GarageBand, or now I've been fortunate enough to upgrade to Logic, which I record into. So that's a fairly low barrier if you're pretty serious about it. Like, it's a minimal requirement, like maybe 200, 300 if you're trying to get started. But as far as like gaining an audience is something I'm still trying to figure out. Something that doesn't come overnight. You have to know that it's going to come with time. And one thing that I was able to learn from reaching out to other podcasters, like I was fortunate enough to be able to have an in-depth conversation with the guys behind It's the Real podcast. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with the podcast A Waste of Time with It's the Real. They're like these guys, and they're these brothers in New York who interview everybody who's anybody in music, in the music industry, like all your favorite rappers, all your favorite radio personalities have been on their podcast. And I reached out to them, and I was able to talk to them on the phone. And one key they gave me was to, when it comes to podcasting, the two keys are quality and consistency. As long as you're giving out a quality product over a consistent amount of time, opportunities will come. You know, people will see what you're doing, and you may not have an audience. You know, don't get caught up in the numbers. You know, I don't have the numbers that I want, and you may not get the numbers that you want initially. But always just keep working forward. You know, keep pushing through that, and don't get discouraged through that. Just keep putting out consistent quality content, and over time you'll get these opportunities. You know, like with myself, I've gotten job opportunities. I've gotten prominent people to come on my podcast just off of a quality product that they can see has stood the test of time. And this is like worth their time. Exactly. You're putting in effort to make sure it comes out. And because audience hasn't really been a big thing that I've hooked anyone in with quite yet. You know what I mean? I may have to utilize that in the future. But right now, people just really bang with the vision. People see the content that I have and really like the mission behind it. Or even relate to it. And they see that I'm serious about it and passionate about it. So that's what gets them involved. So if you are able to market that, the audience may come, it may not. I mean, but as you reach more people and tap into their audiences and get them to market for you, then you'll gain the numbers that you may desire, you know, with time. Right on, man. When I talk to you, I feel like I'm talking to a guru, man. I'm just really, man, I'm glad all of this up. Like, I'm glad that I come off as a guru, because right now I'm just in the thick of it, you know. And these are keys that I can't necessarily claim as my own. These are things that, you know, in my research that I've learned from people that I've talked to, and someone like Gary V. He's someone. Shout out to Gary V. if you're listening. Shout out to Gary V. Man. Please look into me if you're listening to this, man. Please, in some sponsorship or partnership capacity, but get that K-Swiss going. I rock K-Swiss every day if that's what it takes. Right. But I probably won't sell out that much because K-Swiss is kind of trash. Hey, but it is what it is. But with Gary V, he's a hugely successful with social media marketing, and he has a ton of keys for anyone who's starting a business, wants to be an influencer. He's someone that I've learned a lot from. Charlemagne is someone that I've learned a lot from. Gotten a lot of gems from, and different people, man. I would, it'd be a long list for me to just go down and say all the people, your influencers, because you know, you guys influence me in a way, you know, listening to like the episodes that you send me, listening how you guys conduct your episodes. In that sense, I try to grasp inspiration from everywhere, you know, all around you. I try to think deeply about everything, you know. The fact that you're wearing this orange shirt right now may make me think like, wow, what inspired him to wear that orange shirt, and how did it make me feel when he wore that shirt? Maybe when I wear an orange shirt, I'll have that impression on someone else. I don't know. I mean, that's just a basic way to think about it. Right. But like the way you soak in your environment is like, let me soak it in and then turn around and see how I can use it to my advantage. I feel that. Try to absorb as much as you can. So I guess you gave us a lot of lessons today, man. I like honestly, but we usually like to wrap up by figuring out some lessons you would have for people who are inspired to follow their own dreams. You know, a lot of our listeners, I mean, our theme is like
dreams that stress our parents out, you know, things that are non-traditional career paths, you know. Even your job right now doesn't have a job description, or like even the podcast you're doing, even if it's not profitable right now, it's like something that you're doing, you know, that's important. So someone else that may be following their dreams, what tidbits of advice would you have to, let's say, like a high schooler who's like just graduating and they're trying to figure out what they want to do in life?
Wow. Okay, so high schooler, I would definitely say something like, if I was like giving a graduation speech, is to, I'm going to combine two schools of thought, something that I've gotten from Gary Vee and from Charlemagne. Can I curse on this podcast, or do you prefer for me to keep it?
Go ahead, see what happens.
Because this is a harsh curse word. I don't know if you want me to say it on your podcast if you don't want me to curse.
All right, I'll keep it PG. We can bleep it out.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm out of respect for the person's house that I'm into, I won't curse. But so Charlemagne has said something like, as far as like, in his book, he says, F your dreams, or like screw your dreams when they're not your dreams. And Gary Vee has gone to say like screw your parents, you know what I mean? Do what you are fulfilled in doing. So I'm going to combine both of those to say, you know, when you have to realize that this is your life at the end of the day, and it's not your parents' life, it's not your friend's life, you know. When you fail at whatever it is, everyone's gonna point fingers at you. They're not gonna point fingers at your parents or at your friends. You know, it may be their fault, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to work through whatever mess you're in. So I would say ultimately, screw what your parents say, screw whatever you might think your dream is, or like screw whatever the American dream is.
Right.
Focus on finding what it is you're passionate about. And I mean, I don't want to say like screw all passions of money, because we all know that money rules everything. You may you may have to make some compromises along the way. You may not jump out the gate and be a singer or a rapper or an athlete, you know. But if you keep an open mind and you follow your passion, you'll find a career that's going to fulfill you. And, you know, if it comes to sports, you know, you may become a coach, or you might be a manager for a sports team or something, you know, somewhere behind the scenes. So keep an open mindset, and forget your parents' dream for yourself, and forget the dreams that you see around you, the successful dreams of your friends or of your mentors. You know, you have to find your own dream and put 100%, 110% into that. And once you find your purpose, your passion, something that you're completely passionate about, the money will come. You know, even last year would never thought that I'd be in the school system, working with kids and not going to medical school. But me right now, I'm super excited about it. I'm super excited about being back on the school schedule so I can get those breaks again. Get those
summer breaks going.
And I'm super passionate about I'm super excited about working with kids and sharing knowledge with them and mentoring them to make better decisions than I made at their age, and giving them the keys that I never had. You know, I want my podcast and my personal aspirations are to always be that person that I never had when I was growing up. So, and to inspire those, like the people that I talk to be that same person that they never had. So in that way, we're always paying forward whatever knowledge that we gain. So that would be my advice to anybody. Just focus on yourself. Don't get caught up on what your parents want you to do, or what your peers want you to do, because you're gonna, even if you do become a successful doctor, there's a chance that you may still feel unfulfilled. You know, money isn't happiness, success isn't happiness. Your purpose is where you find happiness. Your passions are where you find happiness. And of course, you know, for some people, money is where you know. I mean, that makes happiness easier to attain.
I get you.
If you can find that middle ground, you know. I don't know, I might be rambling even more far beyond what you wanted me to say, but in that 7-month long period where I was trying to redefine myself or redefine my purposes, I kind of came up with this central dogma where, you know, like in the Bible we have these holy 10 commandments, and in our country we have laws, in school we have rules, and we have syllabus. You know, we as people, we need to develop our own personal syllabus code. Or code, you know. So I created my own, and in that one of my codes to myself, personal code, was that money is just fuel. It's not the goal. It's not the prize. So I always want to look at money for myself as just the fuel to help me, reach a higher level of whatever my purpose is, So right now I may be able to afford being a podcaster, which is dope.
Right.
But my goal is to sustain myself even more. So, I just want money to be fuel,
right?
Like how you put fuel into your gas tank,
right? That's always taken out of the budget straight away. Just like
when you
drive,
exactly. When you're driving, you're not. Your whole purpose isn't to drive to the gas station to get as much fuel as you can. You just fill yourself up with fuel to go to wherever your destination is. So that's how I want to treat my life. I feel like our lives should be parallel to that metaphor. Where we're not chasing the fuel, we're using that fuel to keep us going.
To I love that, man.
Higher.
I like that. So you know what? I'm just gonna leave that there. That's a perfect way to wrap that up. Hey man, Javier, it's been a pleasure having you on our podcast.
It's a pleasure to be on the podcast.
On your setup in your city.
Yeah, man. It's not often that I get to talk about this because I'm so often the interviewer.
Yeah.
So it's so great to share my perspective and to talk about things outside of just non-traditional families because, like your listeners may have learned, I've learned so much in this process. To where I feel like I have a lot more than just mental health topics to contribute, so I appreciate platforms like the one that you're doing, one that I envy. And
too kind.
I appreciate these type of platforms that allow me to share those keys where I ordinarily wouldn't be able to.
Right. Man, thank you so much. VibrantSons.com, man. Go take a listen to this man's podcast. Honestly, it'll change your whole perspective. It'll wake you up. It'll give you something to relate to if you can relate to it. It's just it's a masterpiece. I would call it a masterpiece.
And hopefully it'll inspire you to overcome your own challenges and to break down some communication barriers with you and your loved ones. So if you guys want to connect with me, Vibrant Sons, Vibrant SONS, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You guys can follow me. And if you want to follow my personal me as a person, I'm at Thank You Suave on Twitter and Instagram.
Right on.
Thank You SUAVE, and that's just my personal moniker.
Right on, man. Hey, been a pleasure, and
most definitely
catch us on the next podcast, and we'll see you soon.